the flagship restaurant of the Gilded Table, sat in the heart of Manhattan, gleaming like a jewel among the high rises. The scent of polished oak mingled with freshly ground coffee and a whisper of smoke from grilled meats on the stovetop. Warm golden light from brass chandeliers spilled onto exposed brick walls, creating a space both luxurious and inviting. The soft clinking of silver cutlery sounded like a quiet symphony of success. Customers, young entrepreneurs in crisp suits, well-to-do families with children in cashmere sweaters gathered around impeccably set tables. This was where the American dream seemed real. Julian Croft stepped inside, wearing faded jeans and an old hoodie. No one would guess he was the founder of the restaurant chain. He paused, inhaled deeply, and caught the herbal aroma of the Isabella's Harvest Bowl, a dish named after his late wife, a symbol of the early days when he and Isabella stood side by side in the kitchen, dreaming of a place that would bring joy through every plate of food. He smiled, but his heart felt heavy. The latest financial reports showed rising profits, yet the soul of the Gilded Table was fading. He was here to find it again. At the counter, Eleanor Ellie Vance stood behind the register, her tired eyes masked beneath a thin layer of makeup. Dark circles peeked through like ink stains that refused to disappear. Her smile was polished and professional, but it never reached her eyes. Her fingers moved across the touchscreen, mechanically, like a lifeless dance. Julian ordered the Isabella's Harvest Bowl and handed over the company's special credit card, the kind reserved for top-level executives. Ellie nodded and swiped it, but the screen flashed red. Before she could speak, Marcus Thorne, the manager, appeared. His leather shoes gleamed, catching the light. He glanced at Julian, then turned to Ellie, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "There's an issue with the card. Cash only." The words hit like an invisible slap, and Ellie froze her cheeks, flushing red. Julian quietly pulled out cash, his gaze locked on Marcus. Marcus turned away, leaving Ellie in a suffocating silence. Julian took his tray of food, but as he looked at Ellie, time seemed to slow. She turned her face, the back of her hand brushing her eye. A single tear shimmered, no dramatic fall, just suspended for a moment before vanishing like a buried secret. In the elegant room, surrounded by polite laughter, that tear was eerily silent. Julian sat down, but Isabella's Harvest Bowl now tasted bitter. A single tear, he thought, in my multi-million-dollar empire, a single tear just fell. The gilded cage had revealed itself, and it was imprisoning the very people he had once promised to protect. Julian sat at the table, the Isabella's Harvest Bowl untouched in front of him. He didn't eat. His eyes swept across the restaurant, like a seasoned detective searching for clues. Smooth jazz filled the air, but the laughter of the staff was absent. They moved like chess pieces across an invisible board, each step calculated, no motion wasted. The atmosphere was taut like a string, pulled to the point of snapping. Julian realized the Gilded Table wasn't just a restaurant. It was a system designed to suffocate the human spirit. A young employee, Jake, according to his name tag, accidentally dropped a tray of drinks. Glasses shattered and orange juice splashed across the floor. Marcus Thorne didn't yell. He approached his polished leather shoes, stopping just short of the spill. His voice was quiet, icy. "You know, Jake, the restroom cleaning shift is open. Might be a better fit for your skill set." Jake's ears turned bright red, his lips pressed white, and his eyes lowered in shame. The other employees pretended not to notice, but their shoulders slumped, as if each of them carried an invisible yoke. Julian clenched his fists under the table, fingernails digging into his palms. Humiliation doesn't need to shout, It cuts deeper when whispered. Julian rose and pretended to head toward the restroom. On the way, he paused by the shift schedule pinned to the wall. Ellie's name was written in sharp ink, 5 hours, but he'd been here long enough to know she'd worked nearly 9 today. He ran a finger across the paper, feeling the cold finality of dried ink. 5 hours, he thought. Those letters just stole 4 hours of her life in a single day. The shift board wasn't just a schedule. It was a sentence, written with ruthless precision. Near the storeroom, Julian spotted Ellie, secretly on the phone. She stood hunched in a corner, her shoulders curled inward, like she was trying to disappear. Her voice trembled, barely louder than rustling leaves. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy will be home as soon as she can." "No, Mommy can't leave early." A pause. "I love you so much, Tommy. I promise we'll make it up this weekend." She ended the call, gripping her phone tightly, eyes squeezed shut, as if holding back a tidal wave of emotion. Julian stood just a few steps away, feeling like something was crushing his chest. The guilt of a mother who couldn't be with her child because of work. That was a wound he hadn't anticipated. Julian returned to his table, his gaze now sharp as steel. This isn't poor management, he thought. This is psychological warfare. And my people are losing. The fear didn't come from shouting. It came from the quiet threats, the sideways glances, the whispered remarks, and the distorted numbers on a piece of paper. In the kitchen, amid the sizzle of pans and the rising scent of herbs, Samuel Sam Jones stood like a mountain. His hands, calloused from decades of holding a knife, flipped each piece of salmon with reverence, as if every fillet were a work of art. His movements were calm and deliberate, unshaken by Marcus Thorne's cold, watchful gaze. Sam embodied craftsmanship and pride in one's work qualities no authority could break. Julian watched him and realized this was the only person in the restaurant who didn't bow to fear. Julian stepped into the kitchen, not as an owner, but like an old cook, returning to familiar ground. He stood beside Sam, breathing in the scent of roasted onions. "This smell," he said softly, "takes me back to the early days. Isabella once burned a whole tray of onions, and I nearly blew up the microwave trying to reheat soup." He chuckled a self-deprecating laugh. Sam glanced at him, eyes cautious, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Julian continued. "We dreamed of a place where people felt like family, not just co-workers." He wasn't probing, he was opening up. His words peeled away Sam's protective shell. After a long silence, Sam stopped chopping vegetables. He looked directly at Julian, his gaze cutting through the pretense. Every Friday night after close, he said, voice low and nearly drowned by the hum of the exhaust fan, "Marcus pulls cash from the register. Says it's to balance the books for Mr. Finch." The name Finch landed like a curse, heavy, dangerous. Julian felt a chill run down his spine. Alistair Finch, the regional director he once trusted, was now a name tangled in wrongdoing. Sam pulled a small, worn leather notebook from his apron pocket. The pages were yellowed with age. He opened it and showed Julian the neatly handwritten entries, dates, times, amounts, withdrawn. "I don't know whom I can trust," Sam said. His voice didn't shake, but it carried weight. "But I know this is wrong. I didn't keep this to accuse anyone. I kept it to remind myself what's right." That notebook wasn't just evidence, it was a relic of conscience, a small flame burning in the dark. Julian held the notebook, feeling its weight stretch beyond the paper. This wasn't merely documentation. It was a quiet declaration from a man who refused to be complicit. "Thank you, Sam," Julian said, his voice roughened with emotion. In Sam's eyes, he saw a flicker of hope, the quiet courage of an ordinary man standing tall in the face of injustice. Julian left the kitchen, notebook in hand, knowing he had just found his first ally in the battle ahead. Julian sat in a luxurious hotel room, the glow of his laptop, the only light in the darkness. The room, with its leather chairs and windows overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline, now stood in sharp contrast to the filth he was about to uncover. His fingers moved swiftly, logging into the internal system with top-tier access. He typed in the name Alistair Finch, and the screen lit up like a map, leading straight to the heart of rot. Julian held his breath, the sensation akin to opening the lid of a coffin. The data flooded in like a tidal wave. It wasn't just Manhattan. Boston, Philadelphia, D.C. Every branch under Finch's control bore the marks of a merciless machine. Reported revenue was suspiciously low, ingredient costs had spiked, and dozens of manual wage adjustments were recorded like cold-blooded cuts. One email from Finch to Marcus appeared: excellent labor cost optimization. Marcus, keep this up, and next quarter's bonus will be well worth it. Julian felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't mismanagement, it was a plan executed with surgical precision. Alistair Finch, the man Julian had once trusted, had twisted his dream into an engine of exploitation, crushing the dignity of hundreds. The silence inside those restaurants wasn't accidental, it was engineered and rewarded. Julian turned on the printer. Its mechanical whir sounded like the heartbeat of a wounded beast. Sheet by sheet slid out, each one a fragment of betrayal. He stacked them into piles, one for Boston, one for D.C., one for Philadelphia. The stacks grew taller, like paper tombstones, burying his ideals. He reread a line from one of Finch's emails: keep employees grateful, just to have a job. That's the key. Julian's fists clenched, nails digging deep into his palms. The key, he muttered. He calls turning people into slaves a key. Each sheet of paper represented a stolen life. Ellie with her silent tear. Sam with his worn notebook. Dozens, maybe hundreds, he had never met, but whose weight he now felt pressing on his chest. I handed Alistair Finch the keys to the kingdom, Julian thought, and he built torture chambers inside it. The anger didn't erupt in screams. It smoldered like embers beneath ash, ready to ignite. This was no longer about a restaurant. It was a battle to reclaim the soul of the Gilded Table. Julian looked at the towering stacks of paper and knew each page was a bullet. His war had begun, and Alistair Finch would never see it coming. Julian stepped into the restaurant's break room after closing time. The flickering fluorescent light cast a harsh glow on stained walls, a stark contrast to the glamorous image outside. Ellie Vance sat slumped over the table, her hair disheveled, arms wrapped around a crayon, drawing from her son a simple house under the sun. The room was cluttered, steeped in the lingering scent of stale coffee and fryer grease. Julian stood silently, feeling like he was intruding on something deeply personal. He sat across from her and gently said, "Ellie, that drawing's beautiful." His voice was soft, like a father speaking to a child, acknowledging that she wasn't just an employee, but a mother, a person. Ellie looked up, her eyes red, struggling to swallow the lump in her throat. Julian's simple words cracked the shell she'd built around herself. She broke down, not with a single quiet tear, but with gasping sobs, like a dam finally collapsing under the weight of too many silent days. "I used to want to be an artist," she said, her voice trembling. "Then Tommy was born, and I guess I thought the problem was me, that I wasn't good enough to hold on to that dream." She pointed to the drawing. "I promised I'd give him a better life, but I can't even make it home in time to read him a story." Her pain wasn't just about the job, it was about feeling like a failure Julian let her speak. Let it all spill out. Then he took a deep breath, his voice rough with the burden of truth. Ellie, I'm Julian Croft. Her eyes widened in shock, but before she could respond, he continued. And I've failed. I built the Gilded Table to be a home, a chance for people like you. But I let men like Alistair Finch turn it into a cage. This isn't your fault, Ellie. It's mine for staying silent too long. His confession didn't come from a powerful CEO. It came from a complicit man seeking redemption. Ellie blinked her tears. Finally pausing, she looked at him as if for the first time someone truly saw her. Julian took her hand, his voice firm. I promise you we're going to take it all back. Ellie inhaled deeply, then pulled out her phone and opened photos of tampered pay stubs. Her hand no longer trembled. I kept these because I knew one day someone would need them, she said. In that moment, they were no longer boss and employee. They were two people on the same side, ready to tear down the gilded cage. The silence was broken, and in that shabby break room, a pact was made. Julian knew Alistair Finch was too clever. He would wipe every trace clean before anyone had the chance to ask questions. What Julian needed was a still smoking gun, undeniable proof. In the old HR records, he found the name Chloe Rivera, a young financial analyst fired by Finch for insubordination after questioning discrepancies in reports. Chloe was the missing piece, the one who had dared to challenge the system and paid for it with her career. Julian sent her a message asking to meet at a small cafe in Brooklyn where the dim lighting and scent of toasted bread offered a fragile sense of safety, but not enough to ease the fear. Chloe walked in, wearing a worn coat, her eyes laced with worry, constantly glancing toward the door as if expecting to be followed. Her hair was hastily tied back, a few strands, falling across her forehead, a sign of the hard life she'd lived since leaving the Gilded Table. Julian didn't waste time. He sat down and spoke in a low, earnest voice. Chloe, I'm not here to make promises. I'm here because of Ellie Vance, a single mother who works 9 hours a day but only gets paid for 5 because of Sam Jones, who's kept a notebook recording every stolen dollar. This isn't about numbers, Chloe. It's about people being turned into tools. The stories of Ellie and Sam struck her conscience like a stone, breaking the still surface of a lake. Chloe said nothing at first, her fingers tightly wound around a cup of cold coffee. I lost everything, she whispered. My home, my friends, my trust in people. All because I asked why the numbers didn't add up. Julian nodded, not pushing. He told her more about Ellie's silent tear, about Sam's worn notebook. They're fighting, Chloe. They need you. Her eyes softened as if a crack had formed in the wall she'd built around herself. From her bag, she pulled out a small black USB stick, worn at the edges. This is why I got fired, she said. This is the original. Project Goldmine. Julian brought the USB back to his hotel and plugged it into his laptop. The Excel file opened, and he felt his blood run cold. Project Goldmine was a blueprint of greed profit projections based on cutting hours, slashing wages, and artificially inflating ingredient costs. Every column of numbers was a knife to his employees' dignity, every formula a dream stolen. This isn't negligence, Julian thought. This is a calculated crime. The USB wasn't just evidence, it was Finch's confession, written in numbers void of humanity. Chloe, the reluctant hero, had kept it not out of vengeance, but out of conscience, even after the system tried to crush her. Julian gripped the USB tightly, knowing he had just found the final bullet. The fight was no longer just for justice, it was for a truth no one could deny. Alistair Finch's office sat atop the highest floor overlooking Central Park's glittering lights. A polished ebony desk, an overpriced abstract painting on the wall, and floor-to-ceiling windows reflected his smugness like a mirror. Finch sat in a sharp grey suit, his smile thin as a razor. "Julian," he said with condescension, "enjoy your little hands-on experience." Julian didn't answer. His eyes were locked in cold and focused, like a hunter sizing up his prey. Finch had no idea he was walking into his final battle. Julian placed the evidence on the desk, deliberate, precise. First, Sam's worn notebook, the yellowed pages, documenting every stolen dollar. Then Ellie's pay stubs, each number a cut across her dignity. Finally, the stack of falsified reports, each page a shard of betrayal. Finch scoffed, shrugging lightly. "Just necessary operational adjustments," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. His arrogance was a shield, but also his Achilles heel. Julian inserted the USB into Finch's computer. The large screen behind him lit up. Project Goldmine blazed across it like a verdict. Charts, figures, and the entire exploitative blueprint filled the room. Finch's smile froze. His eyes widened, panic flashing, before it hardened into raw fury. "You have no idea what you're doing, Julian," he roared, slamming his fist on the desk. Julian stood tall, voice calm and cutting, like a judge delivering a sentence. "I know exactly what I'm doing. You turned my company into a gold mine built on human suffering. You turned employees into slaves. The board meets for 1 hour. Resign quietly or face them with all of this." The room grew suffocating, broken only by Finch's heavy breathing. He looked at the screen, then at Julian. Realizing there was no way out, his smug confidence shattered like glass under a hammer. As Julian turned to leave, Finch muttered, part disbelief, part disdain. "You really think the world runs on kindness, Julian? You're a dreamer in a sea of sharks." Julian didn't look back. The truth on the screen was the sharpest blade of all. This wasn't an argument, it was an execution by justice. Finch, the Goliath of greed, had been defeated by the very numbers he created. Julian walked out, leaving him with the silence he had built. The audience doesn't cheer for violence. They cheer because justice won not through force, but through intellect and truth. The flagship restaurant of the Gilded Table now buzzed with laughter like a brand new melody dissolving the old suffocating silence. Julian Croft stood behind the counter, apron tied around his waist, guiding new staff as they arranged vegetables for Isabella's harvest bowl. His teenage son Ethan wiped down tables nearby, sweat on his brow, but a beaming smile on his face each time his father glanced over. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was a home where people were seen and valued. The scenes cut like a fast-forward montage. A bold headline on the New York Times: CEO Julian Croft restores justice at the Gilded Table, fires senior executives, and establishes $20 million restitution fund. Ellie Vance, now regional training director, stood before a group of new hires, her voice warm. "We're not just here to work, we're here to build empathy." Behind her, an easel held an unfinished painting, crayon lines, vibrant with the dreams she had revived. Sam Jones, now head of quality assurance, tasted a new dish with a young chef. He offered guidance, not orders, his smile full of pride, like a mentor watching his student grow. Chloe Rivera sat in her new office, the plaque reading Director of Corporate Integrity gleaming. Her fingers typed steadily, eyes sharp. She was now a guardian of truth. The final scene returned to Manhattan. Julian and Ethan worked side by side, staff laughter mingling with the scent of roasted herbs and fresh coffee. This was a redeemed legacy built on the dignity of labor. Julian paused, then turned to the camera, breaking the fourth wall. Have you ever worked in fear? He asked, his voice low and intimate, like a friend confiding in you. He held the silence, letting the weight of the questions settle, an invitation for viewers to reflect. Then he continued, "They say the American dream is built from nothing. They're wrong. The real dream is building people. Don't let your silence be complicit in injustice. Your voice is your legacy." His words echoed like fire, awakening a conscience. The restaurant was no longer a gilded cage, it was a beacon of hope spreading from Manhattan to every location it touched. Viewers felt the healing of Ellie, of Sam, of Chloe, and of themselves, those who had once witnessed injustice in silence. The story ends, but its message lingers, urging each person to stand up and speak out. If you loved this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Toch Story for more powerful journeys just like this one.